Good morning. It's Friday, January 9th. The multi-front war in the Middle East is now 826 days old. I'm your host, Jonathan Schanzer. Welcome back yet again to the FDD Morning Brief. The United States has seized 2 tankers linked to Venezuela. One of them was tied to Hezbollah as well. The action continues in the Caribbean basin, and it's hard to keep up. I continue to monitor how this may or may not impact the Islamic Republic of Iran and its primary client, Hezbollah. They've both relied on Latin America as a hub for money laundering and illicit trade. It's early days, so we're going to continue to watch it, but it's a factor that could exacerbate the woes facing the Iranian axis across the Middle East. More on that, I hope, soon. Today's guest is Gadeer Kamal Mreeh. She's CEO of GKM Global Consulting. Gadeer brings rare and important perspective on many issues in the Middle East. She's an Israeli. She's a Druze. She's a former member of Knesset. We're going to be covering a lot of ground with her today, from Israel's internal politics, the relationship between Israeli and Syrian Jews, and the wider regional forces that are reshaping the Middle East. So stay tuned for that modest scope of conversation. We'll be joining her right after I take a not-so-subtle shot at the self-righteous crowd in America that hammered Israel relentlessly for 2 years and hasn't said a word about the brave Iranian people fighting their oppressors in Tehran. So here we go. The unrest continues in Iran. More people came out last night after exiled Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi called for bigger protests. U.S. President Donald Trump again warned the regime to keep its blood-soaked hands off the protesters, and yet the death toll now stands at 45. The government in Iran cut the internet and phone lines. It's a sign of total fear, and for good reason. The regime is in trouble. The 12-day war with Israel last year destroyed its credibility. The water crisis has exposed its ineptitude. The currency crash and U.S. sanctions have pushed the country to bankruptcy. It's all adding up, and this brittle regime is teetering. You know what would really help right now? More calls from abroad for the regime to stand down and to give the people their freedom. But here's the galling part. I don't see the democracies of Europe stepping up. I don't see the students on America's prestigious college campuses siding with the Iranian people. And I don't see the self-righteous celebrities of Hollywood taking to Instagram and speaking out on behalf of the brave men and women of Iran. Look, I don't often comment on social trends in America, but this simply must be said. The self-righteous American social justice warriors have been exposed. Their silence is deafening. I see only selective outrage and virtue signaling. So yes, I hope the regime in Iran collapses under the weight of these protests. That would be a good thing for the Middle East. Let's also help the insanity that has gripped some segments of America since 10/7 collapses with it. Now for your headlines. Headline 1, a big Gaza announcement is expected. According to Axios, President Trump is going to announce the Gaza Board of Peace. Peace is breaking out, guys. This board's going to oversee reconstruction efforts in the coastal enclave, as well as Gaza's yet-to-be-formed technocratic government. Yet to be formed, right. The plan is for Trump himself to chair the 15-member board. Sources say invitations have already been extended to prospective board members. God, they're going to be thrilled. Among the countries expected to participate are the UK, Germany, France, Italy, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and wait for it, Turkey and Qatar. I mean, seriously, folks, what could possibly go wrong with Hamas-sponsoring countries like Qatar and Turkey getting a hand in the reconstruction of Gaza? Seriously, I'm just banging my head against the wall here. If all goes as planned, the Gaza Board of Peace with Qatar and Turkey could hold its first meeting at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, in a couple of weeks. That probably sounds pretty swanky to you. But I'm here to just tell you that this is not going to be easy. So enjoy the cocktail parties in Switzerland while you can, folks. Gaza ain't Davos. You guys have some tough challenges ahead. Headline 2, the Lebanese Armed Forces said that they completed the first phase of its plan to deploy across South Lebanon and disarm non-state groups. This is really not a serious claim. Sorry. Because there's still plenty of Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. Everyone knows this. Everyone and their bubby knows this in both Lebanon and Israel. And everybody knows that Hezbollah is only not a danger now, or at least not as much of a danger now, because Israel's been bombing the snot out of them. So look, don't get me wrong, Lebanon and Israel have the same objective here. They both want sovereignty for Lebanon, and they both want Hezbollah gone. But let's stop pretending that the Lebanese army is doing anything. As a result, the threat is growing. Israel may need to launch an operation to clean up in the land of the cedars. So yes, I'm watching the North more carefully these days. More on that, I'm pretty sure, but I hope I'm wrong. Headline 3, an Iranian hacking group claimed that it identified an Israeli agent coordinating Mossad operations inside Iran. Not sure I'm buying any of that, but okay. The hacking group is known as Handala. This is the name of the Palestinian cartoon character you may have seen. It was created to symbolize the Palestinian plight. Handala has been on the cyber scene for a while, and it previously claimed responsibility for multiple operations targeting senior Israeli officials. Just last week, Handala said it hacked former Israeli Interior Minister Ayelet Shaked's phone and her WhatsApp account. This time, Handala published several videos it alleged were shot outside the home of a Mossad agent whom the hackers claimed is helping to coordinate and fund the anti-regime protests because, the people of Iran aren't angry enough at their regime, and they couldn't just be doing this on their own, right? It's not organic. Seriously. Okay, whatever. But anyway, Handala threatened to release more footage throughout the night. Interesting to see Iran trying to carry out offensive cyber operations against Israel as it fends off massive protests at home. All right, now for what should be a fascinating perspective of an Israeli Druze and former member of Knesset. It's time to bring on Gadeer Kamal Mreeh onto the program. Let's dive right in. Welcome to the FDD Morning Brief, Gadeer.
Thank you, Jonathan. Good morning. Thank you for having me.
It is my pleasure. Okay, I want, if you would, just for 2 minutes, just tell us your story. You're a Druze woman that grew up in Israel. What was that like, and what was the trajectory that brought you here?
Wow, that's right. I always open my lectures by saying I am an Israeli, but not a Jew. I am an Arab, but not a Muslim. I am a minority within the Arab minority. My mother tongue is Arabic. My religion is Druze, and I am an Israeli U.S. resident here in Washington, D.C. Good luck. And then the next question is, you are a Jew, because in the American accent, Jew and Druze are the same. I said, no, I am a Druze, D-R-U-Z-E. And the next question, who are you? Who are the Druze people? So I have very unique identity being a Druze Israeli woman here in the big town in DC. I was a journalist broadcasting news in Israel for the first time in 2 languages, both in Arabic and Hebrew. By the way, Jonathan, sometimes on the same day. Imagine opening up the news at 7 p.m. in Arabic, Masa'ul Khair min Urushalim al-Quds, and then at 8 in Hebrew, Arif Tov Lechem Yerushalayim. So I believe I symbolize very unique identity of the state of Israel, kind of mix of factors of identities. After journalism, I went to politics. I did 3 national elections, elected, re-elected, breaking records, and then I decided to take time out, seeing the crisis that we are, by the way, still in it. And after that, I was appointed by the president of the state of Israel, Herzog, to be the first non-Jewish senior envoy of the Jewish agency, completing 3 years of successful public diplomacy mission, connecting Jews to Israelis, Jews and Arabs, reaching, expanding, penetrating in different communities, by the way, including in Dearborn, Michigan, post-October 7th. I started writing a book about my work, which is fascinating, the ability to speak in Arabic, but also to be an Israeli in the big US. So very mixed achievements in public diplomacy, in journalism, in politics, and now in global consulting.
It's pretty wild. Okay, so you were the head of the Jewish agency, and you're a Druze, so it was like the Druze-ish agency for the 3 years that you're doing it. All right, but okay, I want to ask you, being a Druze in Knesset, right? You're a minority, you're a welcome minority, you're advocating for the country, you're advocating for your, just tell us a little bit about what that was like for the time that you were in Israel's legislature.
Wow, so I was the first Druze female to be at the Knesset, to be elected. And I was kind of a hot product. It was the first time to have an Arabic speaker woman, a Druze, which is, in terms of politics, have the balanced view, not extreme left or extreme right. I was very active in public diplomacy, in parliamentarian diplomacy, a member of caucuses. I also launched and established my own subcommittees. I understood that my power is beyond legislation, that we have very unique opportunity to implement my unique understanding of reality. And when I say my unique understanding, Jonathan, it's beyond, it's the multi-layer how I see it in terms of legislation. Yes, my sector, my electorate is Druze, but I am also an Arab representing the 20% of the Arab Israeli citizens, but I am also an Israeli. So I was working in three layers, in the national levels, providing services to people in Tel Aviv, Jewish men and women, but also to Arabs and Druze. And each sector has its own unique or typical challenges, opportunities, demands, and aspirations. So you need to kind of maneuver and work and diversify your legislation to provide services as a member of parliament to all sectors and be loyal to all sectors in all levels.
And that's the interesting thing about the Druze, right? The Druze are loyal to the government or the country where they live. And I think that makes it really interesting. And it's one of the reasons why the Druze are such a welcome minority in Israel, but also in other places, except maybe in Syria. Okay. Now, this is interesting, right? We're watching the Druze minority in Sueda, in particular, in the south of the country. They've been under strain since, well, I mean, before the fall of the Assad regime and since. We have this regime in Syria that's supposed to be pragmatic, but of course we know they come from an Al-Qaeda background. HTS was the Nusra Front. The Nusra Front is Al-Qaeda, and they are fighting for independence, autonomy. What can we say about what the Druze want in southern Syria right now as the map shifts in real time?
So that's right. If we go back to the Druze in Israel, we are considered to be a successful model of an integration in a state that I believe bilaterally both parties are proud of, both the Druze minority and the state of Israel, reminding our viewers that we have no national or territorial aspirations. It's not written in our faith that one day we seek or will work to have our own entity or establishment. That is why we are loyal to the country that we were born in. Israeli Druze are loyal to Israel, Syrian to Syria, Jordanian to Jordan, and Lebanese Druze to Lebanon. We draft into army, Jonathan, in the highest percentage in Israel. 82% of the Druze people draft into the IDF, higher, by the way, than the number among the Jewish sector. In terms of national service among females, we reach already 50%. So we are talking about deep, loyal, strong connection that I always say it is similar to the relationship between the state of Israel and the state of the United States of America, in the way that it is relying first on values, on mutual goals. That is why we succeed to overcome any challenges during the recent decades. Going to the Druze of Syria, I totally agree with you. What happened post the fall of the dictator Bashar al-Assad in December 24 became rapidly into a campaign of terror against any minority which is not Muslim. We saw that happening against the Alawites, the Kurds, the Christians, and the Druze in the most brutal, barbaric terror attack that I am sure you all remember. What we call the October 7th of the Syrian Druze community. What we had, Jonathan, on October 7th of these barbaric terrorists operating freely for one day. They were operating freely for 1 week, leading to the killing of 1,500 Druze people. So you ask yourself, you don't have to be a political expert. Common sense, guys. Are these the inspiring positive signals that we are seeing emerging from Syria? I don't, be careful of what you wish. We are not naive. Intellectually, we are mature enough to understand, yes, it is a kind of a typical chaotic atmosphere post-war or in a transitional mode. But seeing these barbaric terrorists, shaving the beards of religious Druze members as symbol of their identity, of their tradition, of their history, seeing kids being raped, seeing families burned alive, seeing children being sniped. Are these the positive signals that we are seeing? Okay, I don't see here a sophisticated, open-minded, educated, Western, liberal leadership. What I see is extremism, is radicalism, is Islamism. So that is why I am saying hold your horses. When we are talking to the US administration here, specifically the foreign policy, specifically the Middle East, I saw the enthusiasm, the insociative of Tom Barak, of Witkoff, when they come to the Middle East, want to achieve rapid peace. We all want to see rapid peace, by the way, not just in Syria, but also in Lebanon, in Gaza, but hold your horses. As someone who was born and raised in the Middle East, as you know, Jonathan, is much more complex. You need to dive into the nuances of the region, to the history of the Middle East. So it will take time in all arenas, by the way, as you mentioned, in Lebanon, as you mentioned, they will convene the Board of Peace in Davos, at the WEF, at the World Economic Forum on January 23. We want that to happen, but it will take time.
Yeah, it will. All right. So now you've explained some of the complexities of this regime and the way that it's engaged with the Druze. Now let's unpack this just a little bit more, because you have this relationship between the Israeli government and the Syrian Druze. For the first time, Israel has actually vowed to protect the Syrian Druze, who are essentially trying to hold out against an onslaught by this regime. But the Israelis in Paris just cut some kind of security arrangement with the Syrian regime. I don't understand all of it yet. We're sort of digging into it. Maybe you can help explain what's going on here. It looks like this sort of triangle, maybe a square when you start to add in the United States and the kinds of guarantees that I guess we're trying to provide. But as a Druze, as you look out at what's going on between Syria and Israel, help us unpack this.
So it's fascinating, the rapidity, the dramatic developments that are reshaping the entire Middle East, by the way, post-October 7th. As you know, if we dive into southern Syria, historically, and I wrote about it, it's a rare momentum to have bilateral interest of both the state of Israel, that was, as you know, interested in southern Syria historically, reminding us all, Abba Khushi, one of the leaders of the Zionist movement, met the iconic leader of the Druze people, Sultan Bash al-Atrash, and it was documented already in 1936, before the establishment of the State of Israel, seeing the Druze minority then there in southern Syria as a stabilizer, as kind of pro-Israeli, pro-Zionist, pro-Jewish, that one day that the State of Israel can establish some of alliance with them. So it's very rare momentum to have both the national security interest of the State of Israel in southern Syria and to have a pro-Israeli community in southern Syria. And we are seeing the maps that Prime Minister Netanyahu is drawing here, which is fascinating. So if I zoom out to recent talks in Paris, sometimes I ask myself, Jonathan, the parties are talking about, okay, demilitarize southern Syria, withdrawal to the 1974 lines, which if we go to the geopolitical understanding, that to the typical topographic, this is my son, by the way, Liam, in modern era, in multitasking, women, motherhood,
no need to explain. We all got it going on.
So let us go back to southern Syria. When I see what they are writing or discussing, the most beautiful ski resort, they are talking about us, the Druze people, that we are very well known with our hospitality, warm hospitality, as you know, the delicious cuisines, that it's going to be a flourishing arena. And I ask myself, it reminds me of the 20-point agreement in Gaza, like 462 inspirational words, a flourishing Gaza, economic development. Somehow we need to think still, to wait and to work and to dive into details. As you know, President Trump is less concerned with details, but as you know, the devil is in the details. So somehow someone need to dive into details. You have a concentration of more than 100,000 Muslims in that continuity in Dar'a region. So if you seek to demilitarize, how they are going to react. There are many questions when we talk about details in southern Syria. How are we going to implement if we succeed? Everyone was so enthusiastic. We said, okay, it will happen in summer 25, and it didn't. By the way, in Lebanon too, I am sure you saw the announcement yesterday of the army of Lebanon. We succeeded to the disarmament of Hezbollah is done, mission completed, and Prime Minister Netanyahu said, hold your horses. The danger is still there, although we had a remarkable achievement. But we are talking about roughly 20% of the arsenal of Hezbollah still there, including hundreds of mid-range range missiles and thousands of short-range missiles and more than 1,000 drones and recruitments. This intelligence picture is worrying Israel in both arenas, as you know, in Lebanon and Iran.
And I think we're going to see, I think it's very likely that people have been talking about whether war erupts again in Gaza, like a hot war. I think the more I hear, the more I talk to Israeli friends overseas, the more I think that Lebanon is probably the next flare-up. That's what I think. But I want to ask you something, Gadeer, because, and I don't know if you know the answer to this, but how concerned are Israelis right now about Turkey's involvement in Syria? In other words, when you look at the treatment of the Druze, but not just the Druze, I mean, we're talking about the Alawites, especially the Kurds. All the minorities in Syria seem to me right now to be threatened, not just by the jihadi regime or the former jihadi regime, depending on how you look at Ahmed al-Shara, but the influence of Ankara right now. How are you looking at that? Because that doesn't look good from my perspective.
Neither to Israeli perspective. It's in terms of prioritizing the arenas, the emerging of the new axis of Turkey, Qatar. By the way, Qatar too succeeded to leverage its status from a mediator into a regional superpower. What we are witnessing of Turkey's influence in Gaza, we are seeing, Jonathan, tractors with Turkey flags operating in Gaza, rebuilding Gaza. And Israel is asking, what is happening here? We didn't go to the most complex, longest war in Israel to kick out Hamas to bring in Turkey. And it was a successful year for Erdogan. As you know, regionally, even globally, everyone is trying to attract his attention, flattered by Trump, by Putin. And the greater influence in Syria is a red flag for Israel. Although Shara is trying to maneuver, he had 20 international trips trying to signal to Erdogan, I am not a pocket in your pocket as Syria. But in terms of a pure, narrow Israeli interest, seeing Turkey now with its hostile approach toward Israel, enlarging, bringing more influence in the rebuilding process is a red flag, is a red line. As we all remember the visits of U.S. officials in October, and a famous sentence that I take with me, that the Vice President J.D. Vance said, okay, Israel is not a vassal state, we are seeking for partnership, but now Israel is asking itself, is the real say will be taken at the Oval Office? Where is our say? Where decisions are making in Kiryat Gat or at the Kiryat? Who is controlling the arena? Because Israel is seeing the complexity on ground, and for us, Turkey is a red line. So it will be fascinating.
It needs to be, right? And I think Israel's actually made that clear. But by the way, for those listening at home or watching, when we talk about Kiryat Gat, that's where the U.S. officials are. Those are the people that are trying to figure out what the future of Gaza is supposed to look like. These are the senior military advisors from the U.S. that are in Israel right now trying to navigate a way forward. Gadeer, we're running out of time. I do want to ask you one last thing, and I'm going to put you on the spot here. We're heading into election season in Israel. You've been in the thick of it, right? You've been in those battles within the Knesset. You know what it's like. I can't even imagine some of what you've seen, because politics in Israel is like a blood sport. But how do you see, is it Bibi time again? Do you see a new challenger? Which party do you think comes out ahead? Who gets to build a coalition if you had to bet right now?
So recent polls from yesterday are showing that the Likud is still the biggest party with 25 mandates, although we have 10 mandates of the two Arab parties who are somehow in the middle. As you know, the complexity in Israel that we have just one house of 120 mandates. So it seems that it's going to be challenges. It's very close. Yesterday, it gave 52 to the coalition, but you have the 10 mandates of the Arabs that no one knows yet what is going to happen, if they are going to establish another kind of unity government of Bennett Abbas, or the Likud or Prime Minister Netanyahu is going to attract them somehow of one of the opposition leadership. But it seems, I would tell you two things. If I need to predict, I would say Prime Minister Netanyahu is going to lead, is going to win the next election, regardless if you agree or disagree with his political views. It seems to see that, people didn't predict that he would survive October 7th. Jonathan, as you know, he entered October 7th with 64 mandates, and he ended the war 2 years after with 68 mandates, with more extra 4 mandates at the Knesset, at the coalition. So I would say he would win. Yes, Bennett is challenging him, but some are worrying that maybe Bennett will suffer from Bennett syndrome too, in the way of, as in 21, the polls gave him 20 plus, and he ended with 6 mandates. So it's fascinating. And as you know, domestically, the political arena, like the clock in the region, is also ticking. We are in a year of election, regardless if it is going to be an early election in May or June, or the November election. Everyone is living in a campaign. So I assume Prime Minister Netanyahu is going to lead us or take us away from the hot potatoes, the draft law, the commission law, into regional opportunities or kind of achievements.
I think so too.
Iran may develop, and that would affect the mandate.
Oh, yeah. If Iran falls, Bibi, he can claim victory. I do see him as being the front runner, but, always good to hear from an Israeli expert, and you are one. We're going to leave it here for now.
And maybe, Jonathan, allow me to finish with the famous sentence that I am sure you know, and the most stable thing in the Middle East is its instability. So let us wait and see, and it's fascinating, these developments.
True enough. All right. Thank you, Gadeer Kamal Mreeh, for joining us today on the FDD Morning Brief.
Thank you, Jonathan.
All right, terrific discussion there. Here's what FDD has on tap for you today. My colleague Hussein Abdul Hussein has a piece in the English language Lebanese outlet. As always, it's called This is Beirut. And he's arguing that Lebanese citizens must prioritize their own country and interests rather than allowing foreign powers to interfere and foster dependency. But he doesn't just lay aim at Iran, which is the obvious target. We're also talking about other Arab powers. It's a good policy. No more foreign meddling, or in today's parlance, make Lebanon Lebanon again. Meanwhile, in the Wall Street Journal, FDD's Reuel Marc teamed up with Ray Takei of the Council on Foreign Relations, CFR, to examine whether the Islamic Republic of Iran and the Altakakr Ayatollah can withstand a new wave of increasingly fervent protests. Although the regime appears to be attempting a somewhat gentler response than in past crackdowns, these demonstrations show no signs of abating. Finally, my colleague Cleo Pascal, along with the Atlantic Council's Alexander Gray, they write in the National Interest about the United Kingdom, the Brits, could be making some moves in the South Pacific that could hinder our ability here in Washington to counter Beijing's aggression in the South Pacific. You don't see reports like this every day. Super granular stuff. Highly recommend to read. And that, folks, is it for today and for the week. Mic drop time. And what a week this has been. If you're looking for some smart things to read over the weekend, check out our expert analysis on our website, fdd.org. Catch our quick takes across the socials. And yeah, you can still start off the year right by making a tax-deductible donation at fdd.org/invest. Who knew? Actually, no, you did. All right, tune in Monday for another gripping episode of your favorite morning show. Until then, I'm Jonathan Schanzer signing off for FDD.